Year's Eve 2011. Most Americans are intoxicated, or about to be, and the news cameras are setting up at Times Square. In Washington, a more somber ceremony is underway. Invitation only. President Barack Obama signs into law the NDAA, or National Defense Authorization Act. Like so many war-related bills, the NDAA has been rubber-stamped by the House and Senate, receiving near unanimous support by both Democrats and Republicans. Yet this bill had a very special clause. The rules formerly applied only to foreign terror suspects or enemy combatants would now apply to American citizens themselves. Overturning hundreds of years of common law, Americans could now be subject to indefinite detention and even murder without the benefit of due process.
You have elites at the top, and then you have ordinary Americans who are subjected to this harsh system of punishment. And now we've created a new category, an even lower category, as part of the war on terror. That is for people who are accused of being involved in some way with terrorism, including people who are American citizens and those who are found on American soil. So if you are poor and indigent, you will be assigned a public defender who can spend an average of 7 minutes speaking with you during the course of your case, even if you're charged with a felony that can send you to prison for decades, but at least you get the pretenses, the trappings of due process. But if you're accused of terrorism, you basically are in a world where you are a subperson, a non-human, a world of complete lawlessness, which means that you can be detained by the government or even killed by the government without even a shred of due process. I talked earlier about how I stopped litigating and began writing about politics because I perceived there was this creeping extremism. The case that really alarmed me the most initially, that led me to do that, was the case of Jose Padilla, who was an American citizen arrested on U.S. soil at Chicago International O'Hare Airport in 2002. And rather than being charged with crimes and having evidence presented against him and a jury of his peers convened in order to see if he could be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt with his guilt established, Padilla instead was declared by the president with no oversight or checks of any kind to be an enemy combatant and put into a military brig in South Carolina, where he remained for the next 3.5 years, was never charged with the crime, and was even held completely incommunicado. He was barred from any communication with the outside world, including even a lawyer, and was then tortured to the point that he now has very crippling and permanent psychological disabilities. This was the President of the United States asserting the power without much resistance to imprison. He was an American citizen born in the United States, as much of an American citizen as anyone that you know, and yet he was imprisoned for 3.5 years without charges of any kind because the president claimed the right to imprison accused terrorists without having to prove their guilt. I had thought that was the most radical power that we would see a president assert, the most lawless and radical power, until a year ago when the Obama administration went much further than that and announced that it believes it has the power not only to eavesdrop on American citizens without warrants, or to detain American citizens without due process, but to target American citizens for death, for assassination, without a shred of due process, transparency, oversight, or checks and balances. And the Obama administration not only asserts this power, but has applied it and seized it by targeting the American-born cleric Anwar al-Awlaki and then killing him several months ago in Yemen by sending a drone over a car in which he was driving far from any battlefield and ending his life along with the lives of 2 other human beings in the car, one of whom was an American citizen. And then 2 weeks later, another drone flew over Yemen and killed his 16-year-old son, also an American citizen, and his 17-year-old cousin. So here you have a world not where due process is woefully inadequate, but where it simply doesn't exist. It's literally a world of lawlessness. And this is really what the abandonment of the rule of law has brought, which is the justice system treats you not based on what you've done, as blind justice requires, but based almost entirely on who you are. That really is the definition of the abandonment of the rule of law.
Under the Bush and Obama administrations, the veil had been lifted once and for all, at least for those willing to switch the channel.
Charlie Sheen has never been more candid about it and makes no excuses for it. He also shared with us some of what really happened that night last month when he was rushed to the hospital after a drug-filled night with porn stars.
Now to the latest on Lance Armstrong and all the fallout after his admission to Oprah that he doped to win the Tour de France and other races during his cycling career.
I want to discuss the last Fox debate in which a gay soldier got up at the debate on video and asked whether or not as president you would reinstate Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Well, Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, a Christmas tree or a holiday tree? Which should it be? Depends on whom you ask. We've seen controversy, most notably prompted by the White House. It sent out cards, this card matter of fact, wishing a holiday season of hope and happiness. No mention of Christmas. I mean, guess what? There are bigger things out there going on in the world, in the news, in this country specifically. And so here, I'd like to play just a little bit of catch-up since we've been on break. Just in time to start off a brand new year, President Obama went ahead and signed the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. The same Authorization Act that also includes a provision for indefinite military detention.
A group of individuals from a wide range of backgrounds have filed suit against President Obama, Leon Panetta, and 6 members of Congress. The plaintiffs include rights activists, whistleblowers, authors, and professors, among them Chris Hedges, who all believe their First Amendment rights have been violated and feel imminent danger due to the president's recent National Defense Authorization Act, known as the NDAA.
We had a huge turnout this morning. There were several hundred people waiting in line. From what I also understand, people were coming in the front entrance as well. The main courtroom, from what I understand, was full capacity, and we spilled over into a secondary room on a lower floor, and there were probably at least another 100 to 200 people present in that room.
On December 31, 2011, President Obama signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2012. A bill passed each year. Section 1021 of the bill provides sweeping powers of detention through vague and undefined terms. Critics say it grants the government to arrest any American citizen or anyone anywhere without warrant and to indefinitely detain them without any charge.
Whatever high ground that we ever held in our moral conviction that we believed in a democracy no longer applies. I mean, we now are the people that are conducting the war of terror. It's not the war on terror, it's the war of terror.
On September 12, 2012, the suit had one of its biggest victories.
The judge did rule in favor of the plaintiffs that portions of the act were not constitutional. And that was heartening to hear, that a judge would say that at the federal level. Locally here in New York, I guess it's the Southern District, and that was overturned in the appeals court.
On October 2, 2012, a stay against the permanent injunction was granted by a 3-judge motion panel of the 2nd District U.S. Court of Appeals, pending appeal on the merits.
The government is being more and more aggressive. It's asserting more and more rights to enter other parts of civil life in the name of fighting terrorism. That goes too far. If we don't have cases like this fighting back, the government will grasp more and more power.
Wednesday's court hearing was open to the public.
Campaign partners say that over 60,000 emails have been sent to Congress calling on the reversal of Section 1021 of the NDAA. Basically, what they're saying is that everyone from journalists to war correspondents to activists are in danger of imminent detention and arrest. Susan Madaris, Press TV, New York.
But for my purposes on the so-called war on terror, what it does is continue what I call the Bush-Obama policies. The first of those policies is indefinite detention, that you can pick up people anywhere in the world, and what's interesting, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely without trial, and even hold them offshore. We expected this last Congress to try and put in legislation that would at least prohibit the holding of U.S. citizens. They didn't, so it's still authorized by the law. And of course, that's the lawsuit that Chris Hedges and Daniel Ellsberg have gone to court to try and declare that section of the old law, now the new law, unconstitutional. So you have an NDAA that first allows indefinite detention of anyone in the world, including U.S. citizens. Secondly,
before you get into that, Michael, wasn't there some amendment that came out of the Senate that ensures, or at least is supposed to ensure, habeas rights for U.S. citizens?
well, they have a habeas right, but they can still be held indefinitely in detention.
So explain what that means, a habeas right.
Everyone now, because of the cases we won at the center over the last 10 years, has a right to go to court and say to the court, which will say to the jailer, the United States, are you holding me legally? The problem with it is legally is now defined by the NDAA as holding someone in indefinite detention.
President Obama had been elected with the promise of change, including in the foreign policy arena. Widely perceived as an anti-war candidate, he would instead codify into the executive branch the rights of a medieval king. In a series of intentional leaks to the New York Times, Obama boasted of preparing kill lists of militants in several countries around the globe.